Within 3 hours, Auntie Essie had arrived, having been summoned by a text from Abena that said only, "It happened. Come." They gathered in the living room, the same room where they had held countless family meetings, where Odessa had announced her engagement, where they had tried so carefully to voice their concerns without pushing her away. Now they sat in a loose circle, watching her with varying degrees of concern, sympathy, and carefully concealed relief. "Tell us what happened," Kwame said gently. "When you're ready." Odessa took a deep breath, wrapping her hands around the mug of tea that had long gone cold. "We were at dinner, the fortnightly club. The bishop had arranged it, of course, with all his important people. The governor's wife was there, a news anchor, half the pastors in Denver." She laughed bitterly. "It was a performance. Everything with him is a performance." She told them about the bishop's monologue, about Danso's silence, about Anissa's careful non-presence. She told them about the moment with the spoon, the small sound that had seemed to contain the weight of everything. She told them about the words she had spoken, and the look on Danso's face when she said them. "He knew," she said quietly. "He knew it was coming. He's known for months. He just couldn't do anything to stop it." "And you?" Auntie Essie asked, uncharacteristically gentle. "Could you have stopped it?" Odessa shook her head. "No, I don't think so. I think this was always where we were heading. I just didn't want to see it." There was a long silence. Then Kofi spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "Has he called you?" Odessa glanced at the phone she had finally turned on, now sitting on the coffee table like an unexploded bomb. 12 times. And texted. And his mother texted. And someone from the church office. "I haven't read any of it. I can't." "You don't have to," Abena said firmly. "Not tonight. Not until you're ready." "The bishop will make this difficult," Kwame observed. "He won't accept it quietly. A cancelled wedding, especially one that was so public, so connected to his reputation, he'll see it as an attack. He'll need to control the narrative." "Let him control whatever he wants," Odessa said, and there was something new in her voice, something harder and clearer than any of them had heard in months. "I don't care what he says about me. I don't care what anyone says. I need to figure out who I am again. I've been disappearing for so long, I don't even recognize myself." Her mother reached across and took her hand. "Then we'll help you find her. That's what families do." While the Moos gathered in Washington Park, a very different scene was unfolding in Westminster. Danso had driven home in a daze, his father's voice still echoing in his ears from the scene at the restaurant. The initial shock, followed by a swift transition to damage control mode. The bishop had immediately begun making phone calls, spinning the situation, ensuring that the right people heard the right version of events. Danso had slipped away during the chaos, unable to face another moment of his father's performance. Now he sat in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of a life that had never quite felt like his own, and stared at his phone. 12 calls to Odessa. 12 ignored. Texts that had gone from confused to worried to desperate, with no replies. She was gone. She had been gone for hours, and he had no idea where she was. No idea if she was okay. No idea if there was anything left of the life they had planned. The door opened without a knock. His mother slipped in, closing it quietly behind her, and sat on the edge of his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Anissa reached out and took her son's hand. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Danso looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he had never allowed himself to see before. A woman who had spent 30 years learning to be invisible, learning to want nothing, learning to accept the unacceptable. His mother, who had always seemed so peaceful, so content in her quiet role, suddenly looked to him like a prisoner who had forgotten there was a world outside her cell. "She left," he said, his voice cracking. "She just left." "I know. Why didn't I stop her? Why didn't I fight for her?" Anissa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured, as if she were choosing each word with the precision of a surgeon. "Because you don't know how. Because you were never taught. Because fighting for what you want, standing up for yourself, that was never allowed. I should have—" "You should have many things." Anissa's grip on his hand tightened. "But you didn't, and now she's gone, and you have to decide what comes next. Not what your father wants, not what the church wants, what you want." Danso stared at her. In all his life, he had never heard his mother speak like this. She had always been the peacemaker, the smoother of rough edges, the one who made things work by never asking for anything. But now, in the aftermath of his own disaster, she was saying something different. "What do you mean?" Anissa took a breath, the kind of breath a person takes before stepping off a cliff. "I mean that I have spent 30 years watching your father fill every room he enters, and I have spent 30 years making myself smaller so there would be room for him. I mean that I love him, I do love him, but love shouldn't require you to disappear. And I have watched you disappear, Danso. I have watched you shrink and shrink and shrink, and I have said nothing, because saying nothing was how I survived. But I won't watch it anymore. Not with you." Danso felt tears prick at his eyes. "Mom." "I'm going to talk to Odessa." Anissa stood, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm going to try to fix this, or at least to help her understand. Not because I think you deserve her, I'm not sure you do, not yet, but because she deserves to know that not everyone in this family is what she saw tonight." "Dad will—" "Your father doesn't get a vote." The words were quiet, but absolute. "Not in this." Anissa Legare had spent 30 years perfecting the art of strategic movement. She knew how to navigate her husband's world without triggering his attention, how to make phone calls from rooms where he never thought to look, how to maintain relationships that existed entirely outside his awareness. It was how she had survived, how she had maintained some small piece of herself in the suffocating atmosphere of his certainty. She found Odessa's number in her phone. She had programmed it months ago during one of the wedding planning meetings, sensing somehow that she might need it, and called from her car in the garage, where the engine noise would mask her voice. Odessa answered on the third ring, her voice wary. "Anissa?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's me." Anissa paused, gathering herself. "I'm not calling to pressure you. I'm not calling to change your mind. I'm calling because I need you to know something." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "I'm listening." "I need you to know that what you did tonight took courage. More courage than most people have. And I need you to know that I understand. More than you might think." Odessa's voice softened slightly. "Anissa, I've been where you are. 30 years ago, sitting in a restaurant very much like that one, watching the man I loved become someone I didn't recognize in the presence of his father. I had a moment, just like you did. A moment where I could have walked away, and I didn't. Anissa's voice caught, just slightly. I didn't. And I've spent 3 decades wondering who I might have been if I had. Anissa, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry for me. Be proud of yourself. You did what I couldn't. You chose yourself. Anissa wiped at her eyes with her free hand. But I'm also calling about Danso. Not to make excuses for him. He has none. But to help you understand. He's not weak, Odessa. He's wounded. There's a difference. He never fought for me. Not once. Every time his father made a decision about our wedding, about our life, Danso just let it happen. He never stood up to him. No, he didn't. Because he's never been allowed to stand up to anyone. His father's love has always been conditional on compliance. And when you grow up with conditional love, you learn that disagreement means abandonment. You learn that the only safe choice is silence. Anissa's voice grew more urgent. I'm not telling you to take him back. I'm not telling you to give him another chance. I'm telling you that the man you love is in there, buried under 30 years of conditioning. And maybe, this is the thing that finally gives him the courage to dig himself out. Another long silence. When Odessa spoke, her voice was thick with tears. I can't wait for that. I can't wait and hope and pray that he figures out how to be himself. I've been doing that for a year, and I'm exhausted. I'm empty. I know, baby. I know. Anissa's own tears were falling now, and you shouldn't wait. You shouldn't put your life on hold for anyone. But maybe you can leave the door open. Just a crack. Just enough so that if he does find his way, if he does become the man you always believed he could be, he knows where to find you. The line was silent for a long moment. Then Odessa whispered, I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Anissa took a shaky breath. Take care of yourself, Odessa. You're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay. After they hung up, Anissa sat in her car for a long time, staring at the garage wall. Then she wiped her face, composed herself with the practiced ease of 30 years, and went inside to face her husband. The confrontation happened faster than even Anissa anticipated. She found the bishop in his study, still on the phone, still managing the fallout. His voice was smooth, controlled, the voice he used for important calls. Yes, I'm sure it's just pre-wedding jitters. These things happen. The young people will work it out. The wedding is still on, of course. We're just giving them space to... Yes, I'll keep you updated. He hung up and turned to her, his expression shifting from professional calm to something harder. Where have you been? In the garage, making a call. To whom? Anissa met his eyes. It was a small act of defiance, but it cost her everything. To Odessa. The bishop's face darkened. You called her? Without consulting me? I called her because she's a young woman who just made the hardest decision of her life, and she deserved to hear from someone who understands. Anissa's voice was quiet, but steady. She deserved to hear that she's not crazy, that she's not wrong, that walking away from this family is not the disaster everyone is making it out to be. The bishop stood slowly, his presence expanding to fill the room the way it always did. You called my son's fiancée, the woman who publicly humiliated him, humiliated this family, to tell her she made the right decision? I called to tell her that I understand. Because I do, Mike. I understand better than you could ever imagine. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been confusion, or might have been the first stirrings of real anger. What is that supposed to mean? Anissa took a breath, the deepest breath of her life. It means that 30 years ago, I had a moment just like hers, sitting in a restaurant, watching you perform for your father, watching him tell you how to live your life, watching you let him. And I had a choice. I could walk away, or I could stay and spend my life making myself smaller, so there would be room for both of you. The bishop stared at her, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time in his adult life. I stayed, Anissa continued, her voice trembling but not breaking. I stayed, and I've spent 30 years being grateful for the crumbs of attention you throw my way. I've spent 30 years being proud of you while you forgot I existed. I've spent 30 years raising a son who learned from his father that love means compliance, that disagreement means abandonment, that his own voice doesn't matter. How dare you? How dare I what? How dare I tell the truth? How dare I say out loud what everyone in that congregation thinks, but is too afraid to say? Anissa took a step toward him, the first time in their marriage she had ever moved toward him in anger. You've built an empire on your certainty, Mike, on your absolute conviction that you're always right. And maybe you are, about theology, about politics, about whatever else fills your head. But you're not right about our son. You're not right about our marriage. And you're certainly not right about Odessa, who had the courage to do what I didn't. The bishop's face had gone through several stages: shock, anger, and now something that looked almost like fear. You don't mean this. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I have never thought more clearly in my life. Anissa's voice softened, just slightly. I love you, Mike. I have always loved you. But loving you has cost me everything except you. And I won't let it cost our son the same thing. She turned and walked out of the study, leaving him standing alone in the room he had always dominated, for the first time in 30 years, with nothing to say. Danso found his father an hour later, still in the study, still staring at nothing. The house was quiet. His mother had gone to bed, or at least to her room, and the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Danso stood in the doorway, watching the man who had loomed so large in his life, and felt something shift inside him. Dad. The bishop looked up, and for a moment, Danso saw something he had never seen before. Uncertainty. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the familiar mask of control. But Danso had seen it. It was real. Son, come in. Danso didn't move. I need to talk to you. Of course. Sit down. No. The word came out stronger than Danso expected. I don't want to sit. I want to stand. I want to say what I need to say. And I want you to listen. The bishop's eyebrows rose. Listen? I always listen to you. No, you don't. You hear words, but you don't listen. There's a difference. Danso's heart was pounding, his hands trembling, but he forced himself to continue. You've spent my entire life telling me what to think, what to believe, what to want. You've planned my future without ever asking me what I want for myself. And I let you. I let you because I was afraid. Afraid of disappointing you. Afraid of losing your love. Afraid of being alone. Danso! Please, let me finish. Danso took a shaky breath. I loved Odessa. I still love her. She was the first person who ever asked me what I thought and actually wanted to hear the answer. She was the first person who made me feel like my voice mattered. And I lost her because I was too afraid to use that voice. Because every time you disagreed with something we wanted, I backed down. Every time you made a decision about our wedding, about our life, I let you. and she watched me disappear, day by day, until there was nothing left for her to hold on to. The bishop's jaw tightened. You're blaming me for your failed relationship? I'm not blaming you. I'm taking responsibility for my own silence. But I need you to understand that your certainty, your absolute conviction that you know what's best for everyone, it's suffocating. It's been suffocating me my whole life. And it's suffocating Mom, even if she's too loyal to say it. Your mother is fine. Your mother has always been fine? Danso laughed, and there was no humor in it. Mom has spent 30 years learning to be invisible. She has spent 30 years making herself smaller so you could be big. She has spent 30 years never saying what she really thinks, never wanting what she really wants, never being who she really is. And you didn't even notice. You never noticed. The bishop stood, his full height and presence finally coming to bear. I have given your mother everything. Everything. A home, security, a position in this community. You've given her a cage, a beautiful cage, with gold bars and velvet cushions, but a cage nonetheless. And you've given me the same thing. Danso's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. I don't want to be like you, Dad. I don't want to fill rooms with my voice and expect everyone else to shrink. I don't want to be so certain of my own rightness that I can't hear anyone else. I want to be the man Odessa believed I could be. The man who takes photographs and sees beauty in ordinary things. The man who listens. The man who loves without demanding that the people he loves disappear. For a long moment, father and son stood facing each other, the weight of 30 years hanging between them. The bishop's face was unreadable, a mask of controlled emotion. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet in a way Danso had never heard. You think I don't know? The words were barely above a whisper. You think I don't know what I've done? Danso stared at him. My father was the same, the bishop continued, his gaze dropping to the floor. Maybe worse. He built me the same way I built you. Through certainty, through control, through the absolute conviction that his way was the only way. I spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, and you know what? I never got it. Not once. Not a single word of praise. Not a single moment of genuine pride. He died thinking I was still not enough. Dad! I told myself I would be different. I told myself I would build something better, be something better. But I just repeated the pattern. I just did to you what was done to me. The bishop looked up, and for the first time in his life, Danso saw tears in his father's eyes. I don't know how to be different. I don't know how to stop. This is who I am. This is all I am. Danso crossed the room and sat down across from his father. The massive desk that had always seemed like a barrier between them, now just a piece of furniture. It doesn't have to be. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we can both learn. Maybe it's not too late. For you and Mom. For me. He trailed off, thinking of Odessa, of the door his mother had asked her to leave open. For whatever might still be possible. The bishop wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so human, so unlike the commanding figure Danso had always known, that it took his breath away. I don't know how. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. Danso reached across the desk, his hand extended. Not as bishop and son, not as leader and follower, just as two men who have spent their whole lives not knowing how to be themselves. The bishop looked at his son's hand for a long moment, then, slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took it. In Washington Park, the Mowo family had finally dispersed, leaving Odessa alone in her childhood room with her thoughts and her phone. She had read Anissa's message, had appreciated its warmth and wisdom, but she hadn't responded. She wasn't ready. She didn't know if she would ever be ready. But as she lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, she thought about what Anissa had said, about leaving the door open, just a crack. Just enough so that if Danso found his way, he would know where to find her. She didn't know if he would. She didn't know if he could. 30 years of conditioning wasn't undone in a day, or a month, or maybe ever. But she also knew that the man she had loved in Boulder, the photographer, the quiet soul who saw beauty in ordinary things, that man was still in there somewhere. Buried, yes. Wounded, absolutely. But maybe not gone. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Anissa. "Thank you for everything. I'll leave the door open, just a crack. But he has to walk through it himself. I can't carry him anymore." She hit send before she could change her mind, then set the phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be fallout to manage, explanations to give, a life to rebuild. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt like herself. Smaller than she had been, yes. Bruised and battered and heartbroken. But herself. And for now, that was enough. The months that followed the cancelled wedding were the longest of Danso's life. They stretched out before him like an endless winter, each day a variation on the same theme. Waking in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering who he was supposed to be now. The room hadn't changed since high school. Trophies from a brief and unremarkable track career, books he'd long since read, a desk cluttered with relics of a boy who no longer existed. It felt like a museum dedicated to someone else. His father had retreated into a strange, unfamiliar silence. In the weeks after their confrontation, Bishop Mike Legara moved through the house like a man learning to walk again after a long illness. He went to the church, performed his duties, delivered his sermons. But something was different. The certainty had been replaced by something quieter, more tentative. He looked at his son differently now, with an expression that might have been respect or might have been fear. Danso couldn't quite tell. His mother, on the other hand, had begun to bloom. It was subtle at first, a slightly louder laugh, an opinion offered at dinner without the usual preamble of self-deprecation, a new habit of meeting her husband's eyes when she spoke. Anissa Legare was emerging from decades of hibernation, and the process was both beautiful and terrifying to watch. She had started taking photography classes at a community college, of all things, claiming she wanted to understand her son's passion better. Danso suspected she wanted to understand her own passions for the first time. And Odessa. Odessa was out there somewhere, in the city they had shared, living a life he knew nothing about. The door was open a crack. His mother had told him about the message, had shown it to him with trembling hands and hopeful eyes. But a crack was not an invitation. A crack was a test, and Danso was terrified he would fail it. The first thing he did was get rid of the suit. It hung in his closet like a ghost. The tailored navy fabric, a reminder of the man his father had wanted him to be. The wedding that would never happen. The future that had dissolved in a Denver dining room. He took it to a consignment shop on South Broadway. A cramped little store filled with the discarded formal wear of other people's failed dreams, and handed it over without a backward glance. The woman behind the counter, a petite Asian woman with silver streaks in her black hair and kind, knowing eyes, looked at the suit with professional appreciation. "This is beautiful work. Custom?" "Yeah, My father's tailor. And you're selling it because, Danso hesitated. The truth was too complicated, too raw, but something about the woman's steady gaze made him want to answer honestly. Because it was for a wedding that's not happening. Because it was never really mine. She nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense. I get that. Sometimes we wear clothes that belong to other people's visions of us. She handed him a receipt. Well, it'll find a new home, someone else's wedding, someone else's vision. That's how it works. Danso walked out of the shop feeling lighter, as if the suit had been carrying more than just fabric and thread. The photography studio was the next step. He had rented it years ago, a small space in the Rhino Art District that he could barely afford, a place where he kept his equipment and sometimes developed film the old-fashioned way. He had let the lease lapse during the wedding planning, too busy and too drained to maintain even this small piece of himself. Now he stood outside the locked door, peering through the window at the dusty equipment, the stacked boxes, the ghost of the artist he had been trying to become. The landlord, a burly man named Rick, who ran a metalworking studio next door, appeared behind him. "Danso? That you? Haven't seen you in months." "Yeah, Rick, I'm back." "Well, I'm thinking about being back." Rick looked at him with the frank curiosity of someone who had seen a lot of artists come and go. "Heard about the wedding. Sorry it didn't work out." "Thanks." The word felt inadequate, but Danso didn't know what else to say. "You know what I tell people who lose their studio space?" Rick leaned against the door frame, crossing his arms. "I tell them that space is just space. You can always find more space. The question is whether you've still got the work in you. The work doesn't care about space." Danso thought about that for a long moment. "I think I might still have the work in me. I'm not sure about anything else." "Then the work is where you start." Rick clapped him on the shoulder. "I'll cut you a deal on the back rent if you promise to actually use the place this time. No more collecting dust." The work became his anchor. Danso threw himself into photography with a desperation that surprised even him. He woke early and drove into the mountains, catching the sunrise over the Continental Divide. He wandered the streets of Denver, capturing the city in its unguarded moments. A street musician playing for an empty plaza, two old men arguing over a chessboard in City Park, a young mother chasing her toddler through the sprinklers at Civic Center Park. He developed film in the darkroom he'd set up in the corner of his studio, watching images emerge from nothing, finding metaphor in the process. His mother came to visit the studio one afternoon, her first time seeing his creative space. She moved slowly through the room, touching things gently, looking at the photographs pinned to the walls with an expression of wonder. "These are beautiful, Danso. You have such an eye." "They're just practice. I'm trying to find my voice again." Anissa stopped in front of a photograph of a woman alone on a park bench, her face tilted toward the sun, her expression one of peaceful solitude. "This one. Who is she?" "I don't know. Just someone I saw. She looked content, alone but not lonely. I wanted to capture that." "That's how I feel now," Anissa said quietly. "For the first time in my life. Alone, but not lonely. It's strange, isn't it? How long it takes to learn something so simple." Danso came to stand beside her, looking at the photograph. "Is it hard? Being with Dad now, after everything that happened?" Anissa was quiet for a moment. "It's different. He's trying. I don't know if he knows how to be different. But he's trying. And I'm trying too. trying to be myself instead of who he needs me to be. It's like learning a new language. We stumble a lot. Are you glad you stayed? She turned to look at him, her eyes soft. I'm glad I'm finally living instead of just surviving. Whether that's with your father or without him, that's still being decided. But I'm glad. For the first time in a long time, I'm glad. Danso thought about Odessa, about the door open just a crack, about whether he would ever be ready to walk through it. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, as breakthroughs often do. He was in Boulder, of all places, wandering the campus where he and Odessa had met. It was a crisp fall day, the kind of day that made Colorado feel like a postcard, and he found himself standing outside the building where their environmental ethics seminar had been held. He could almost see her there, could almost hear her voice asking if he was a genius or just lost. He walked to the Sink, the old dive bar where they'd had their first real conversation. It was early, the place nearly empty, but he ordered a beer and sat in the same booth, running his fingers over the carved graffiti on the wooden table. The memories were everywhere, overwhelming, beautiful, and painful in equal measure. A photograph hung on the wall nearby, one of those old black and white shots of Boulder in the 70s, all bell-bottoms and long hair and mountains that hadn't changed at all. Danso stared at it for a long time, seeing not the past, but the present, not the strangers in the photo, but the familiar shape of the Flatirons in the background. Mountains didn't change, people did. Mountains just waited. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Odessa's name. They hadn't spoken since that night at the Fortnightly Club. He had sent messages. She had not replied. The door was open a crack, his mother had said, but a crack was not an invitation. A crack was a test. What did he have to say to her? What could he possibly offer after months of silence, after years of failing to be the man she needed? He had no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. He had only himself, still uncertain, still learning, still figuring out who he wanted to be. He typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, he wrote something simple. I'm in Boulder, at the Sink, remembering. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again. I don't know if I deserve to be seen, but I'm different than I was. Not fixed. I don't think people get fixed, just different. Trying. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If not, I understand. D. He hit send before he could lose his nerve, then set the phone on the table and stared at it as if it might explode. Odessa saw the message during a break in her workday. She was at a coffee shop near her office in downtown Denver, grading papers for the community college course she taught on Tuesday nights, when her phone buzzed with a notification from a name she hadn't seen in months. Danso. Her heart stopped, then started again at double speed. She stared at the preview, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might say. For months she had been rebuilding herself, rediscovering who she was without him, without the wedding, without the suffocating weight of the Lagare family. She had thrown herself into work, into time with her family, into long hikes in the mountains with her cousin Naya when she visited from New York. She had gone on exactly one date, a disaster with a well-meaning software engineer who talked about blockchain for an hour and a half. She had cried in her mother's kitchen more times than she could count. She had slowly, painfully begun to feel like herself again. And now, this. She opened the message and read it. Then read it again. Then set the phone face down on the table and stared out the window at the people walking past, living their ordinary lives, unaware that somewhere in Boulder a man was sitting in a dive bar trying to find the courage to become someone new. "Everything okay?" The barista, a young woman with purple hair and a kind smile, was watching her with concern. "I don't know," Odessa said honestly. "I honestly don't know." She thought about what her mother had said, months ago, in the aftermath of the cancelled wedding. "You don't have to decide anything today. You don't have to decide anything tomorrow. You just have to keep living your life, and eventually you'll know what comes next." She thought about what Anissa had said the same night. "Leave the door open. Just a crack. Just enough so that if he does find his way, he knows where to find you." She thought about Danso, the man she had loved, the man who had disappeared, the man who was now, apparently, trying to find himself in Boulder. She picked up her phone and typed a reply before she could talk herself out of it. I remember everything. I'm in Denver. If you want to talk, you know where to find me." They met 2 days later at a neutral place, City Park, near the museum, on a bench overlooking the water. It was the kind of neutral that wasn't really neutral, because every park in Denver held memories. Every bench had witnessed some piece of their story. But this one was relatively unclaimed, and they both needed a fresh start. Danso arrived first, which surprised him. He was always late, always the one keeping people waiting. But today he had arrived 20 minutes early and sat watching the ducks paddle across the pond, his hands trembling slightly, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had dressed carefully. Jeans, a simple sweater, his oldest boots. No armor, no performance. Just himself. Whatever that meant now. Odessa appeared on the path, walking toward him, and his breath caught. She was beautiful. She had always been beautiful, but there was something different about her now. A clarity in her eyes, a sureness in her stride. She looked like the woman he had met in Boulder, the one who asked hard questions and refused to shrink. She looked like herself. She sat down on the bench, leaving a careful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Thank you for coming," Danso said finally. "I wasn't sure I would. I wasn't sure I should." Odessa's voice was quiet, measured. "But I've spent months wondering if you were okay, wondering if you were ever going to find your way, wondering if I made the right choice." "You did." The words came out before he could stop them. "You absolutely made the right choice. I don't want you to ever doubt that. I wasn't ready. I wasn't even close to ready. You would have spent your life disappearing, and I would have let it happen because I didn't know how to stop it." Odessa turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time. "And now?" Danso took a deep breath. "Now I'm trying. I don't know if I'll succeed. I don't know if I'll ever be the man you deserve. But I'm trying. I got rid of the suit. I reopened my studio. I'm taking photographs again. I'm talking to my mother. Really talking. For the first time in my life. My father and I are... I don't know what we are. Different. We're different." "You're seeing someone?" The question was careful, tentative. "No." He met her eyes. "There's no one else. There's never been anyone else. There's only you, Odessa. There's only ever been you." She looked away, across the water, at the families picnicking on the grass, the children chasing each other, the ordinary people living ordinary lives. "I went on one date. It was terrible. He talked about blockchain for an hour and a half." Despite everything, Danso laughed. It was a small laugh, surprised out of him. But it was real. Blockchain? Blockchain. I don't even remember what he looked like. Just blockchain. She laughed too, then, and the sound of it was like water after a long drought. I'm not ready to date. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I'm also not ready to close the door completely. Does that make sense? More than you know. They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks, watching the light shift across the water. It was the most comfortable silence Danso had experienced in months. No pressure, no expectation. Just two people, sitting together, breathing the same air. I've been seeing a therapist, he said quietly. Since the wedding. Since everything. My mother suggested it. She's been seeing one, too. Odessa looked at him with surprise. You're seeing a therapist? Yeah, I know, right? Bishop Lagare's son in therapy. My father doesn't know what to do with it. He keeps asking if I've prayed about it, as if prayer and therapy are mutually exclusive. Danso shook his head. But it's helping. I'm learning things about myself that I never understood. Like how I learned to be silent, because speaking meant risking love. Like how I learned to disappear, because being visible meant being criticized. Like how I spent my whole life trying to be what other people needed, instead of figuring out who I actually was. That's a lot of learning. It's a lot of unlearning, mostly. He turned to face her fully. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I want you to know that I'm doing the work. I'm not waiting for someone to save me. I'm not hoping you'll come back and fix everything. I'm trying to fix myself, for myself. Because I finally understand that no one else can do it. Odessa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. That's all I ever wanted, Danso. That's all I ever asked for. Not for you to be perfect, not for you to be fixed, just for you to try. Just for you to want to be yourself, instead of whoever everyone else needed you to be. I know that now. I'm just sorry it took losing you to figure it out. They started meeting regularly after that. Not dating. Neither of them was ready for that word, for the weight it carried. Just meeting. Coffee on Saturday mornings. Walks in different parks, different parts of the city. Long conversations that started shallow and gradually, carefully, went deeper. Odessa told him about the months after the wedding, the crying in her mother's kitchen, the disastrous blockchain date, the gradual process of remembering who she was without him. She told him about her work, her students, her growing conviction that she wanted to do something different with her life, something that felt more meaningful than the policy work she had been doing. I've been thinking about going back to school, she admitted one afternoon, as they walked along the Cherry Creek path. Maybe social work, maybe counseling. Something where I can actually help people, instead of just writing reports about how they should be helped. That's amazing, Odessa. You'd be amazing at that. You think so? I know so. He meant it. You have this way of seeing people, of understanding what they need. You saw me, even when I couldn't see myself. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. You're different, you know. The way you talk now, the way you listen. You're present. I'm trying to be. It shows. Danso told her about his own changes, the studio, the photography, the complicated dance of his parents' evolving relationship. His father had started seeing a therapist too, at his mother's gentle insistence, and the results were slow but visible. The bishop still filled rooms with his presence, but he was learning to leave space for others. He had even apologized to Danso, a real apology, not a performance, for the years of pressure, for the expectations, for the way he had made his son's love conditional on compliance. "I didn't know how to be different," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. "I still don't, not really. But I'm learning. I'm trying to learn." It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo decades of damage. But it was something. It was a start. The photograph that changed everything came in the spring. Danso had been working on a series about second chances, about the ways people rebuild their lives after loss. He had photographed divorcees starting over, recovering addicts finding new purpose, immigrants building homes in unfamiliar places. He had photographed his mother, emerging from decades of silence like a flower through concrete. He had even photographed his father, capturing something vulnerable in the old man's eyes that he had never seen before. But he hadn't photographed Odessa. He had wanted to, desperately, but he was afraid to ask, afraid of what it might mean, afraid of crossing a line they had both been so careful to maintain. She asked him first. "I want you to photograph me," she said one evening as they sat on the porch of her new apartment. She had moved out of her parents' house, finally, into a small place in the Highlands neighborhood that felt entirely her own. "For your series, if you're still working on it." "I am." "But are you sure? It's about second chances, about rebuilding. Is that how you see yourself?" Odessa looked out at the street, at the neighbors walking their dogs, at the ordinary life she was slowly building. "I think it is. I think I've been rebuilding without even realizing it. And I think—" She hesitated. "I think you've been part of that. Not the way I expected, not the way I wanted at first, but in a different way, a better way." They did the shoot the next weekend, in the mountains outside Boulder. Danso chose the location carefully, a meadow where wildflowers grew in abundance, with the Flatirons rising in the distance. It was the same kind of place where he had proposed, but different. Everything was different now. Odessa stood among the flowers, the sun catching her hair, and Danso photographed her. He captured her laughter, her thoughtfulness, the way she tilted her head when she was considering something. He captured the strength in her posture, the softness in her eyes, the complicated history written in the lines of her face. He captured her, fully her, in a way he had never been able to capture anyone. When they were done, they sat together on a blanket and watched the sun begin its slow descent toward the mountains. "These are going to be beautiful," Odessa said. "They already are. The subject helps." She smiled, but there was something serious in her eyes. "Danso, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What are we doing? What is this?" She gestured between them. "We're not dating. We're not dating. We're something. And I don't know what it is, or where it's going, or if it's even fair to either of us to keep it so undefined." Danso was quiet for a long moment, watching the light shift across the meadow. "I don't know either. I know that I love you. I've never stopped loving you. But I also know that I'm not the same person I was, and you're not the same person either. And I don't think we can just go back to what we had. That person wasn't ready. That relationship wasn't ready. So what do we do?" "I think we keep doing what we're doing. We keep showing up. We keep being honest. We keep letting whatever this is become whatever it's going to become, without forcing it, without rushing it, without expecting it to look like what we thought it would look like." He turned to look at her. "I'm not asking you to wait for me. I'm not asking you to commit to anything. I'm just asking you to let me be here, in whatever way you'll have me, for as long as you'll have me." Odessa reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched, really touched, since the night she walked away. Her fingers were warm, her grip steady. "I can do that," she said softly. "I can do that." The door opened wider after that, not all at once. Nothing about their story had ever been all at once, but gradually, naturally, in the way of things that are allowed to grow at their own pace. They started spending weekends together, then weeknights, then entire weeks, when Odessa's teaching schedule allowed. They cooked meals in her tiny kitchen and his slightly larger one. They went to galleries and movies and long, rambling concerts at Red Rocks. They introduced each other to the people they had become. Odessa's family watched the re-emerging relationship with cautious optimism. Auntie Essie, predictably, had opinions. "I'm not saying I trust him," she announced at a family dinner, pointing her fork at Danso across the table. "I'm saying I'm willing to watch, for now. But if he disappears again, if he goes back to being his father's shadow, I will personally, Auntie," Odessa's voice was firm but affectionate. "We're taking it slow. We're both taking it slow. And Danso doesn't need to be threatened into being a good partner. He's doing the work. That's the whole point." Auntie Essie harumphed, but said nothing further. Later, when Danso was helping with dishes, she cornered him in the kitchen. "I meant what I said," she told him quietly. "Not the threat part. Well, yes, that part too. But the watching part. I've seen a lot of men in my life, Danso. I've seen the ones who change, and the ones who just learn to perform change better. Which one are you?" Danso met her eyes without flinching. "I don't know yet. I hope I'm the one who changes. I'm trying to be. But I can't promise you anything except that I'll keep trying. That's all I've got." Auntie Essie studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's more than most men ever offer. Keep trying. That's all any of us can do." The moment that finally swung the door wide open came in the summer, almost a year after the cancelled wedding. Danso had been working on a gallery show, his first real exhibition, a collection of photographs he had titled Emergence. It was about people finding their way out of darkness, about the slow and painful process of becoming oneself. His mother was in several of the photographs. His father was in one, a haunting portrait that captured the bishop in an unguarded moment, his certainty stripped away, his humanity visible. And Odessa was there too, in the meadow photographs, her face a study in strength and vulnerability. The opening was at a small gallery in the art district on Santa Fe, and the crowd was larger than Danso had dared to hope. His parents came together, his father uncomfortable in the unfamiliar setting, but trying, visibly trying, to be supportive. Odessa's family came in force, Auntie Essie examining each photograph with the critical eye of an art collector manqué, her uncle Kwan standing quietly with his arm around his wife. Friends from Boulder, from Denver, from various points in their shared history filled the room. But it was Odessa who found him in a quiet corner, away from the crowd, away from the praise and the questions and the noise. "These are incredible," she said softly. "I knew they would be, but Danso, they're incredible. I couldn't have done it without you." He meant it. Not just the photographs of you, all of it. You walking away was the thing that finally made me wake up. You leaving the door open was the thing that gave me hope. You being willing to meet me where I was, not where you wanted me to be, that's the only reason I'm standing here." Odessa stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you." They stood there for a long moment, the noise of the gallery fading into background static. Then Odessa spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you. I never stopped. But I needed to know that you could be yourself without me, that you would choose yourself, even if I wasn't there to help. And now, I know." Odessa, I'm not saying we're ready for everything. I'm not saying we should go back to where we were. But I'm saying... She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "I'm saying I want to move forward, together. Not as the people we were, but as the people we're becoming. If you want that too." Danso felt tears prick at his eyes. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, gently, the way he might handle something infinitely precious. "I want that," he said. "God, I want that. I want you. Not the version of you that fit into my father's plans. Not the version of me that was too scared to fight for you. I want you now, exactly as you are. And I want to keep becoming together, for as long as you'll have me."
She kissed him then, there in the corner of the gallery, surrounded by photographs of emergence and second chances and the slow, painful beauty of becoming oneself. It was not the kiss of people picking up where they left off. It was the kiss of people starting something new, something built on the wreckage of what had been, something fragile and precious and entirely their own.
When they finally pulled apart, the gallery had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. His mother was crying. His father was smiling. Actually smiling. A real smile, not the performance smile of the pulpit. Odessa's family was beaming. Even Auntie Isi, who caught Danso's eye and gave him a small, approving nod. "I think we have an audience," Odessa whispered. "Let them watch." Danso took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Let them all watch. This is ours." And it was. Finally, after everything, it was theirs.